I would say that if you have only $1,000 to work with, and just like you're listening to this podcast right now, and you may learn something during this podcast that might help you go and get investment money. The first things I want to talk about is the pitch deck. The other thing I want to talk about is how to source investors. And then finally, I'm going to talk about what to do with your first $1,000 in your startup budget. So business idea and the business model, the product and the solution, and the problem that you're solving, the proposition to an investor who's very busy and will probably only take, I don't know, maybe a minute or less to review the pitch deck. I mean, this is a gold mine for you, investor. You should invest right away because you're going to be able to parlay or leverage. And that, I think, is going to open a lot of doors for you when it comes to how to source investment. Hello, entrepreneurs. Welcome to another episode of Tip Top Startups. I'm your host, David Nima, one of the top trademark and technology attorneys in the country. And on today's episode, we are going to be talking about startup funding questions answered. So let's get right into it. Now, I'm sure there are endless questions that startups have about funding, but I want to talk about a couple of most important things in today's video. The first things I want to talk about is the pitch deck. The other thing I want to talk about is how to source investors. And then finally, I'm going to talk about what to do with your first $1,000 in your startup budget. So let's get right into it. Okay, so startup venture is, as we know, a journey. And the point of a startup is to find a repeatable and scalable business model that's profitable. So that's kind of your objective when you are in startup status, as you want to find a repeatable and scalable business model that is effective and the market wants. So one of the first things that you want to do as a startup, obviously, is to get funding. Okay, capitalization is one of the most important elements of a technology startup launch. In fact, one of the number one reasons that startups fail is undercapitalization. Therefore, we want to definitely have an adequate amount of capital in the bank that we can spend wisely so that we can get our startup to launch and essentially find that repeatable and scalable business model. That is the objective at this early stage, which is just to get the right amount of capital just so that we can essentially deploy our idea. We can test the idea and we want to deploy the idea. We want to essentially launch the idea into a product and then roll the product out to early customers, get their feedback, and hopefully get what's called traction. And that should open the door for further rounds of fundraising. So the first thing we want to do is essentially get some initial capital so that we can deploy the idea. And one of the most important things that come about during the fundraising stage is a pitch deck. Okay, and the question is, why is a pitch deck so important? And the reason a pitch deck is important is multiple reasons. One of the main reasons is that it obviously presents your business idea and your business proposition in a quick deck, or otherwise called a slideshow, PowerPoint presentation, to an investor. So essentially you would, very quickly and effectively communicate your business idea and the business model, the product and the solution and the problem that you're solving, and the marketing plan and the competitive barrier strategies and all the use of funds and who's on your team. All these essential elements of your business want to be kind of condensed into a quick pitch deck so that you can effectively communicate your idea to a busy investor. And you want to be able to, you need various kind of types of pitches, right? I think one of the pitch deck can be something that maybe it takes you 2 to 3 minutes to go over if you were doing a presentation of it. But otherwise, it's about 15 to 20 slides, very little information, not that much information on the pitch deck, but adequate enough information to kind of communicate the top level idea of the business model to the investor and let them kind of ask questions about, what other kind of details they want to know about. So it doesn't provide everything in the business in the pitch deck, but it certainly does get the point across about what the business proposition is that you're trying to roll out as a startup. So It's a pitch deck is different than what's called an elevator pitch. An elevator pitch is a 10-second pitch, essentially as if you were pitching somebody during an elevator ride, which is usually maybe 10 to 30 seconds long. And you want to be able to pitch your idea or your business proposition within this time frame. And it's very useful to be able to discuss your business in a quick 10-second pitch. Now, as startups, I understand that we all know that, we're all building highly complex solutions, very novel solutions, and sometimes kind of explaining them because this is a product that probably has never existed before, maybe a little bit of a challenge, and it takes a little bit of time to explain what the product is and what its features are. But that's the kind of game that you want to play with yourself as well as with investors and eventually with customers. And no matter how complex your product is, you must be able to communicate the value proposition of the product or the service within 10, 15 seconds. I mean, if your product becomes mainstream, you're going to be doing advertising on the internet and on television. And most ads are very short. They're 15, 20 seconds long, 30 seconds long. So, you don't have 2 minutes to explain your proposition to a customer or to an investor. And that's why this kind of pitch deck exercise forces you to condense the idea into kind of bite-sized information packages that you can communicate with either an investor, maybe other people on your team, as well as your customer. So the pitch deck is very, very important because it forces you to kind of, like I said, reduce your business proposition into the kind of the lowest common denominator or the most important points of it, which are going to be very concise and will communicate the proposition to an investor who's very busy and will probably only take, I don't know, maybe a minute or less to review the pitch deck, and you want to be able to capture the investor's attention within that 1 minute. So that's one of the reasons that a pitch deck is so important. Now, we talk about here in this blog that it communicates your vision, it highlights your unique value proposition, it demonstrates the market opportunity or what's called the total addressable market, also called the TAM. It talks a little bit about your financial projections and then what I call the numbers, and if it engages and captivates the investor so that there kind of leaves them wanting for more. So it's kind of a advertising campaign as well as a business plan kind of condensed into one presentation. Pitch deck's very, very important. It's very effective, and I would say a pitch deck is even more effective than a full-on business plan because it just really helps you focus on the main big picture ideas at this early stage, knowing that you might have to change things around as you go forward. I mean, that's kind of the nature of startups. So those are some of the reasons why a pitch deck is so useful and important during the fundraising process. So let's talk a little bit about how we get investors to give you their time and to check out your idea and to ask for your pitch deck. Now, there's a lot of different ways that you can come across investors and get your opportunity to give them your pitch. Obviously, one of the best ways is if you know someone. If you know someone who knows someone that is a venture capital investor, somebody who's put themselves out there as an investor in alternative assets, as an investor in technology startups, then you can, asks through your social network whether or not you can get a introduction or what's called a warm intro to the investor, and then you can talk shop with the investor and see if they would be interested in having a pitch deck. So that's definitely one of the easiest ways to come across an investor, which is by just asking your friends and family and coworkers who they know. Now, assuming that you have exhausted that kind of avenue of research for sourcing investors, the other best way to source investors is through the internet. You want to research all the investors that are, let's say, in your state or in the country, for example, in the United States, or maybe even worldwide. You want to find different types of investors. I mean, all you got to do is Google, for example, top technology investors, Los Angeles, top technology investors, New York. There's a lot of ways that you can discover who the main investors are in a certain population or demographic or geographic area. So there's a way that you can kind of identify investors, and you want to research the investors that most closely match your startup industry. For example, if you're working on a social network startup, for example, you certainly want to go after investors who have demonstrated an interest in investing in social networking infrastructure, in the social networking space of the technology world. If, for example, you are interested in or you're launching a startup that has to do with fingerprint technology, for example, or biometric technology, right? Then you certainly want to find investors who are in the biosciences space and are regularly investing in that industry. Or if you're doing a startup that's related to fashion, for example, you want to find the investors who have shown an interest in the fashion subsector of the technology market. So, this kind of makes sense, right? I mean, if you're doing a startup that's related to, children's educational content, let's just say, why you would never go after an investor who's investing in hardware technology for oil companies, for example. That's completely off base. So just, technology is a very, very broad space, and there's technical applications in almost every industry. So you really want to go technology specific and industry specific and see if you can match an investor who's either in your industry or has worked or wants to develop a technology that is related to your technology, like search technology, for example, or ad technology. So there's a lot of different kind of industries in which investors have a particular niche or interest, and you want to find those investors and you want to kind of let them know, you want to contact them and say, hey, look, you may or may not know me, but I've done the research. I know you're interested in this specific subsector of the technology space, and I've got the perfect product for you. Can I send you my pitch deck? You do that 15, 20 times when you've correctly and you've taken the time to source the right investor. I guarantee you will get a yes eventually by an investor, even during a cold contact. So you want to, again, demonstrate to the investor that you've taken the time and you've done your homework and you're reaching out to this investor, not just because they're an investor and have funds and they want to invest and you want their money. They're not gonna be so happy if they kind of find out that that's why you're contacting them. You want to contact them and let them know, look, you're interested, for example, in fashion technology. I'm producing a cutting edge, top of the line, new thing related to fashion technology. You're going to love this thing. You have so many synergies that you can actually lend to this business and really give us a fantastic boost in terms of our marketing or our product development or any kind of other strategic partnership. I mean, this is a gold mine for you, investor. You should invest right away because you're going to be able to parlay or leverage some of the other advantages and know-how that you have in the fashion technology space to make our startup even better. And why wouldn't? And of course, that's going to be terrific for you because you're going to be invested in that startup. So the investors are usually much more keen on listening and at least evaluating startups that are within their particular niche, or one way or another, that investor can bring value to the startup beyond just money. Okay, that's what you call a strategic investor. So that's one of the best ways to source investors. And I'll tell you, one of the greatest places to really find investors within your industry is what's called VC Twitter. So you go on Twitter, you can search for the hashtag VC Twitter and essentially start to watch investors post. And it really gives you an idea of how the market is going, what investors are thinking, and it can provide opportunities for networking. You can send them a DM, essentially open yourself to the possibility of connecting with these investors. And you can always ask them, hey, if maybe this is not right for you, do you know anyone? Can you refer me to 2 people that you think would want to hear about my business idea? One more thing about these investors is that if you're a bona fide technology investor or a venture capitalist or an angel investor, you are eager to find new ideas and opportunities that you can invest your money in. And even at the very early stages, you're looking for good ideas. You're looking for good businesses. So when the entrepreneur does their homework and contacts a correct investor that's within their industry and provides them an opportunity to look at a pitch deck, that entrepreneur is doing the investor a favor. Okay? You're doing the investor a favor because they are on the hunt for new ideas and new opportunities. So all you got to do is show them that you've done little bit of your homework and this is a good general match and it's worthwhile enough for them to take an initial look at. So, and that I think is going to open a lot of doors for you when it comes to how to source investors. So last thing I want to talk about is what to do with your first $1,000 of a technology startup budget. Or if you only have $1,000 to work with, what is the best use of those funds? So as I discussed earlier in this video, undercapitalization is one of the number one reasons that startups fail. Okay, not having enough adequate capital, essentially running out of cash. Now, there's a lot of reasons why you might run out of cash, but one of the main reasons might be that you started with too little cash to begin with. Okay, so I think $1,000 is an extreme but good example of that in terms of, I think nobody would really invest in a technology startup that only has $1,000 budget. Let's say if your budget is $1,000 and you come to me and you ask me to invest an extra $1,000 into your business and take 50% equity of your business, right? So that kind of may sound good, because especially if your business is a really good idea, you're gonna say, hey, David, give me $1,000 and I'll give you 50% equity in this company. I mean, that's a great deal, David. You should definitely take it. What I would say is that as much as I want 50% of your company equity, which is of course a substantial amount, I'm a little bit concerned, because if I invest $1,000 into your company now only has $2,000 to work with. And that is traditionally not enough capital to successfully launch the company. And therefore, the company is already off to a high risk kind of assessment, because a higher risk assessment than normal startups, because of this undercapitalization. Therefore, I would not be inclined to take that deal, even though you're offering me 50% equity, which is ludicrous and I don't think you should ever do. But even if you're offering me 50% equity, I mean, what do I want? 50% of nothing? I mean, there's a good chance that with a $2,000 budget, this startup is not going to be able to get off the ground. So that's kind of proves to you why $1,000 is certainly not enough, and it's an undercapitalization of the company. So what should you spend your $1,000 on? Now, that's a little bit of a tough question, but I would say that if you have only $1,000 to work with, and for a technology startup launch, the best things that you can invest in are either social capital and or intellectual capital, all in an effort to kind of bring more financial capital into the business. Okay, so let's talk about that. So social capital would mean, maybe investing a portion of that fee to attending a networking event, or maybe a conference, or anywhere else where other entrepreneurs and other investors are going to be in the room, and there's an opportunity for you to have face-to-face contact with some of these people within the industry. That might be a really worthwhile investment or use of your $1,000 budget, because it can expose you to the right investors, or maybe some other collaborators at that event that can help you position yourself for the full funding that you need for your business. So that kind of social networking investment might be a good use of funds. The other avenue in which I think you can invest this $1,000 budget on is education. The more that you know about some of the legal and business due diligence of your company, and the marketing plan and the strategic launch strategy that you have in mind, you want to make sure that those strategies are crisp and really just, you've learned the best in class in terms of strategy for your legal due diligence, your business and marketing due diligence, your product launch, all the other things that your startup might need. Lack of know-how, lack of knowledge may be another one of the high, areas of concern for a young startup. So if you can equip yourself with that additional information, just like you're listening to this podcast right now, and you may learn something during this podcast that might help you go and get investment money. Another thing that maybe you're doing something that you can improve on, maybe there's a tactic or some kind of messaging that you are now privy to, and some kind of new kind of technique that you become privy to, and that increases your chances of getting successful funding. So education is another good investment at this early stage, because just one little kernel of information might open the door for you for that ultimate investment, or that one thing that you said to an investor really made that investor think, oh wow, this is a good idea, this is a good person, I'm going to invest in this entrepreneur. So that's kind of the rundown here of some of these kind of frequently asked questions for funding of a technology startups. We talked about the importance of a pitch deck. We're talking about how to get investors to essentially listen to your idea, or how to source investors, and what to do with, a very kind of minimal startup budget of maybe $1,000, and how to parlay that to raise more money. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe Tip Top Startups on Instagram and YouTube. If you are interested in this information, we talk about pitch decks and investment relations in Chapter 2 of Tip Top Startups, and that's going to be available on Amazon. If you're filing a trademark, or you're having brands in your portfolio and you want to get a handle on best practices for your trademark protection, pick up a copy of Tip Top Trademarks. That's also on Amazon. And again, like and subscribe on YouTube. Share with your friends and family who are interested in entrepreneurship. I'm David Nima, one of the top trademark and technology attorneys in the country, founder of Tip Top Startups Academy, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.